Over the past few years, advancements in battery technology have been nothing short of amazing. Some of the capabilities these advancements bring will have a profound impact on how we use our vehicles. In this episode, we'll explore how the latest battery designs, materials, and innovative chemistries are unlocking new possibilities for energy storage, powering not just vehicles, but a sustainable future that goes far beyond transportation. We are excited and privileged to have joining us today one of the world's leading battery researchers, Dr. Jeff Dahn. Jeff is Professor Emeritus at the Department of Physics and Atmospheric Science and the Department of Chemistry at Dalhousie University. His recent work has concentrated on increasing the energy density, improving the lifetime, and lowering the cost of lithium-ion batteries. He is the author of over 820 journaled papers and co-inventor of 78 inventions with patents issued or filed. Jeff, welcome back to another episode of Canada Talks Electric Cars.
Yes, thank you, Tim. Happy to be here.
Well, I think you were saying at one point when we were preparing for this that this isn't our first rodeo. We've done this. This will be, I believe, our fourth opportunity to hear you present on a battery-related matter. And every time you do, there's a lot of interest and a lot of comment and a heck of a lot of great information. So thanks again for coming on and doing this with us.
Okay, thanks, Tim. So I've shown in the previous episodes that good lithium-ion batteries can operate for a very, very long time. And for people who have not heard me before, I'm going to just talk about some recent updated data. And the work that I'll talk about is collected on these relatively small lithium-ion pouch cells. They're 220 milliamp hours, but their construction exactly mimics the construction in large lithium-ion cells. And if you don't recognize this coin, it's an Estonian euro, which is about the size of one of our loonies. So the voltage of an NMC lithium-ion cell varies with its state of charge. So a fully charged lithium-ion NMC cell might be 4.3 volts, and then as you discharge the cell to 0% state of charge, the voltage drops. And when the voltage is higher, the positive electrode in the battery is more reactive with the electrolyte. So many times you charge cells to less than 100%. And what I'm showing here is a battery that's charged to 4.1 volts, which would be about 80% state of charge. Here's an example. And in addition, it's common, as every EV user knows, not to discharge all the way to zero. You might discharge for 20% or maybe for 38% over these type of restricted state of charge ranges. And there's reasons for doing this from a convenience point of view, but also when you do this, it restricts the volume changes that take place in the electrode materials, and that can prolong battery life. This is a slide that I showed, I think, the last time I was speaking here. And this is data for NMC 622 graphite cells. These are a very common type of battery that would be found in electric vehicles like Hyundai Ioniq 5 and Renault 5 and so on. Anyway, all these cells are being charged and discharged with a 3-hour charge and a 3-hour current corresponding to a 3-hour charge and a 3-hour discharge. And the green one is undergoing charge to 4.1 volts or 83% and discharge to 0 every cycle. And it's accumulated 3,300 cycles over this roughly 2.5 years. And this is all happening at a high elevated temperature, 40 degrees centigrade, where batteries degrade faster than they do at room temperature. And then the red is a cell that's undergoing discharge only to 23% state of charge, and the blue to 45%, and the black is just a 20% SOC range. So what you see is that when you do a small SOC range, the capacity retention is amazingly good. And what we do is periodically we do a complete what we call a checkup cycle, where we test the black cells over the full state of charge range. And you can see that even though you have the same amount of energy throughput in the cell, when you are doing these small depth of discharge cycles, the capacity retention is way better than it is in the case of the green cell. So what this means is a lot of short charges of your EV is better than leaving the cell to go down all the way down to, for example, 20% or 10% and then charging it all the way back up again. Small state of charge range cycles retain capacity much better for this type of lithium-ion chemistry. Anyway, all these cells have had the same amount of capacity throughput. And if you were using these cells to drive a 400-kilometer range EV, you would have traveled about 1.5 million kilometers. So I showed this data before, and this was data collected up to 2020. Anyway, the black cell we left on the chargers, and it's still running today, and I'll show you where it is now. So this is the cell that's running with a charge to 4.1 volts and a discharge to 63%, about a 25% depth of discharge range. It's accumulated 40,000 of these small discharge cycles, and it still has over 80% of its capacity remaining here compared to when it started. And here I've plotted it for as a function of time. So it's gone about 7 years, and it still has 80% of its capacity, and it would have powered a vehicle over 4 million kilometers. So it's pretty incredible. And you'll notice here that there's a gap in time where there was no testing performed. And the reason for that is we sent the cell to the Canadian light source for testing. And Tim told me that a few episodes, again, you had Toby Bond from the Canadian light source speaking on these in this session. And Toby was the one who tested this cell at the Canadian light source to see what had happened to it over time. So the point of this is that lithium-ion batteries can power vehicles for a very long time, a very long distance, with still having a lot of life remaining. And here I just want to show some other amazing results. And these are for cells that are all testing over the full state of charge range, just discharging to 0% state of charge every single time. And there's 3 different cells indicated by the different symbols, and I'll talk about each one clearly in a minute. But every one of them has a positive electrode of a so-called single crystal NMC material. And the single crystal materials show incredible lifetime. And a lot of manufacturers around the world are switching to single crystal materials of all different types of NMC. So here we have 50% nickel in NMC 532, but single crystal with 83% nickel, 92% nickel. All these materials are becoming much more popular these days because of the really long lifetime that they give. So let's talk about the triangle data first. So the triangles you can see here, you plot the discharge capacity versus testing time in years. And in the middle graph, we show the normalized capacity. So it starts with a fractional capacity of 1. And after these almost 8 years and 26,000 cycles, it has 87% capacity remaining. And this cell was charged to 90% state of charge every time, 12 cycles per day at room temperature. So just being hammered, and it would have driven a vehicle 10 million kilometers and still have 87% remaining. And the square data is very similar to the triangle data. This one is only charging to 80% capacity, but it shows almost identical behavior. Again, almost 8 years of testing continuously, 9.4 million kilometers. And then the star data is worse, and that's because it's running at 40 degrees C, and it's doing 4 charge-discharge cycles per day. Almost 6 years of testing. It would have driven a car 3.5 million kilometers, and it's being charged to 80% every time, and it has almost 80% remaining. So 40 degrees C continuously is not found in Canada anywhere. So in Canada, we're more, even 20 degrees C is higher than the average temperature in most places of Canada. So you could expect there's incredible long lifetimes in Canadian conditions. And then finally, nowadays, LFP lithium-ion cells are becoming popular in EVs and appearing in North America. And you may wonder, how does LFP compare to the NMC cells? So here I'm just comparing some results at 20 degrees C. Again, these batteries are doing 12 charge discharges per day. And the LFP is shown in black. So after 2 years of testing, 5,000 cycles, which would power an EV, 2 million kilometers or so, you still have 96% remaining. And LFP is slightly worse than these single crystal NMC 532 cells, but it's very, very good as well. So in both cases, you're going to have very long lifetime. So just a mini summary at this point. Lithium-ion batteries can have incredible lifetime, even with 100% state of charge cycling. And the lifetime is further increased when many low state of charge cycles are used compared to 100% state of charge cycles. And the lifetime degrades at higher temperatures, and this is true for all lithium-ion cells. But good lithium-ion cells, even at 40 degrees C, will have, very, very long lifetime. And both LFP and NMC lithium-ion batteries can have lifetimes which will far exceed the lifetime of the car, especially in Canada where our temperatures are moderate. So this opens up a lot of interesting possibilities. And I'm just going to touch on a few cases where there's, data in hand that you can talk about. So I was provided a nice PowerPoint by a company called Ampair, and they provide vehicle-to-grid services in France. And they've selected the Renault 5 electric for the vehicle that is vehicle-to-grid enabled, that they're developing software and hardware to provide this vehicle-to-grid service. So there's 2 versions. There's a 52 kilowatt hour version that will give 410 kilometer range, and a 40 kilowatt hour version. And both of them use mid-nickel NMC graphite. So this would be something like the NMC 622 graphite cells or the 532 graphite cells that I talked about earlier. So this is a slide from their PowerPoint, and it's an interesting slide. So you get an app on your phone that's called My Renault app, and it's the scheduler. And what it allows you to do is to say, okay, I'm going to be doing vehicle to grid, but I don't ever want you to take my vehicle below this minimum state of charge. And this is so that you can get to work the next morning or do whatever you have to do. And you may have a target SOC, which is the state of charge that you would really like. So for me, that would be 60%, for example. So what this means is if the renewables are available at such a level that at the departure time that you've scheduled in your calendar, they can get you to the target SOC, they will. Okay, so then within each vehicle to grid session, the car is communicating its needs to the charger via some whatever standard this is. And then the charger um, gives instructions to the box in the house that's, allowing the battery to take energy or deliver it back. And then finally, there's a ability to give feedback to the customer about what happened in the vehicle to grid session. So you'll figure out, from what state of charge ranges you went up and down, and how much money you earned by doing this. So this is set up to be convenient and allow you to have a situation where your car is never delivered to you in a state that you can't drive it. So this is a graph which they presented to give a projection of how the energy retention in the cell will vary with years of use. Okay. So for their cell type, if you drive 20,000 kilometers a year, you would follow this solid line. And after 10 years, you have about 94% of your original energy remaining. Now, you might think, okay, that's probably an overestimate, but no way. From the data I showed you before, this should not be surprising. And the reason is, what does 20,000 kilometers per year of driving mean? It means at 400 kilometers per full cycle, it's only 50 equivalent cycles. So this 10 years, it's only 500 equivalent full cycles. I'm showing you stuff with 20,000 cycles over 8 years. This is nothing. Okay, so this projection is fully believable. And then the dash line shows what would happen if you, in addition to the driving 20,000 kilometers a year, you also did vehicle to grid service. And assuming the vehicle to grid service was 5 megawatt hours per year for 8 years. So then you say, okay, what does 5 megawatt hours per year mean? Well, for the vehicle to grid, if you have a 50 kilowatt hour pack, to store and deliver 5 megawatt hours, it's only 100 equivalent full cycles. Again, that's nothing. So after 10 years, the accumulated use is only 1,500 equivalent full cycles. And I'm showing you things 26,000 cycles with 87% remaining. So this is fully believable. And so for me, this is easy to do. And, I believe it completely. And in addition, if you were being paid 20 cents a kilowatt hour for your 5 megawatt hours per year, that works out to about $1,000 that you would earn over this 10 years. And that's $10,000. And that's that's the cost of a replacement battery. Not that you need to replace the battery at this point. You can continue on for a long period of time. So they've been doing this with somewhere around 500 cars so far for 6 months. And they have this really nice histogram that they show, which shows the frequency of vehicle to grid sessions based on how long those sessions are. So you see this peak here at 12 hours. And this makes full sense because if you come home and plug in your vehicle and leave it plugged in overnight and allow it to do vehicle grid to grid during that time, that would be 12 hours. And some people leave their vehicles plugged in for longer and some for less. And, if you had the opportunity to plug in at home and then drive to work and plug in again at work, that would show up as, maybe a 12-hour session overnight and an 8-hour session at work. So whatever the case may be. But they did highlight this one person who plugged in for 800 hours continuously. And this was when the person was on a trip, but the car was earning him money, or her, the whole time. And then this is a chart that shows the cumulative vehicle to grid energy per vehicle. So this represents all the vehicles that are in this test. You can see there's several hundred dots here. So what this means is, for example, this 1,000 means somebody has used their vehicle in such a way that in a 6-month period, it's discharged a megawatt hour of electricity and charged about 1,700, charged 1.7 megawatt hours or so. So if you look at all these dots, somewhere around this star would be someone that has an average vehicle to grid energy is about half a megawatt hour, around 500 delivered, and maybe a little over 500 stored during charge. So that is only 10 equivalent full cycles for a 50 kilowatt hour pack. It's absolutely nothing. So if you think about half a megawatt hour in 6 months, that would be a megawatt hour per year. And this would translate to about $230 in Nova Scotia. And I think as users learn, that this is not harming the vehicle in any way, and if they leave themselves plugged in for longer and maybe change the parameters on their phone to allow larger state of charge ranges to be accessed during vehicle to grid, they'll earn more money. So that's kind of cool. So I think this is a really nice test case with nice data, really interesting. And when you think about what this means, in North America, this chart shows the US electricity consumption in billion kilowatt hours. So 4.5 billion kilowatt hours, it's 45 terawatt hours. And this sort of plateaued from 2005 to 2020, but now it's ramping up again, in part because of all the AI data centers that are coming online, and also due to EV use as well. But we've seen that one EV doing vehicle to grid can easily store and deliver 1 megawatt hour per year, okay? So 1 million EVs doing vehicle to grid could store and deliver a terawatt hour per year. So you start to actually make an impact on this 45 terawatt hours, especially in this growth period where hopefully all the new electricity generation is solar and wind, and you're going to need storage. So you might think 1 million EVs is a lot, but at the moment, there's about 4 or 5 million EVs in the US and about almost 300 million cars. So as cars convert from gas to electric, and as those electric vehicles are vehicle to grid enabled, you'll really start to make an impact on this, on this electricity use. I think it's really cool. And this is Tesla runs a virtual power plant program in California with its Powerwall. And what happens here is you have your Powerwall in your house, and you enable it to be used in sustaining the grid. So you can store solar or wind and then deliver it back when that energy is needed in the grid. And you get paid for doing that. So this is all operating in California at the moment, and the people involved earned over $10 million in 2024, all of them added up together. And this works perfectly fine. And really, there's no difference between this type of operation and what I'm talking about for vehicle to grid. The only difference is that the battery in a car can move when it's not plugged in, right? But this type of thing is happening already and is successful. So now I want to talk about second use, and I want to use this example from Redwood Energy, which is a sister company to Redwood Materials. So Redwood Materials is the largest recycler of battery materials in North America. And what they've learned is that many of the batteries that come to them for recycling still are useful. So why take them apart? Why not build an energy storage facility with these lithium-ion batteries and use them in Second Life. So this is just an artist's conception. It's not a photograph, but this is what they envisage. And I've taken a few things from the Redwood Energy website, and I just want to read some of them to you. So they have a supply chain where they get end-of-life batteries and they recycle their nickel, manganese, cobalt, aluminum, copper, and lithium. But they receive a lot of batteries every year at the moment, 20 gigawatt hours. So that's the equivalent of 250,000 EVs coming in. And they get 90% of all the lithium-ion batteries in North America, so a lot. And they learn that as many of the batteries that are coming to them still retain more than 50% of their usable capacity, enough to be put back to work before recycling. And they point out here that more than 100,000 EVs will come off the US roads in this year. And they say 5 million EVs are active on US roads. And from the Energy Information Agency in 2024, there was 4 million, and there's about 1 million EVs sold every year in the US so far. So this makes sense. Estimating 350 gigawatt hours of energy that will reach the end of life in the coming years. Another 150 gigawatt hours enter the fleet every year. Okay. So this is increasing fast and could supply 50% or more of the entire energy storage market. So it's incredible. So these Redwood Energy guys have already built a 63 megawatt hour capacity microgrid from used EV batteries. And it's the largest Second Life battery deployment in the world. And it just demonstrates that Redwood Energy can do this. Okay. And what sets Redwood Energy apart? Well, the point is that they are the people that are collecting most of the used EV batteries in North America. And they say they have a gigawatt hour of reusable batteries in their deployment pipeline. And that's expanding by an additional 5 gigawatt hours in the coming year. Okay, so what does this mean? What does 5 gigawatt hours of reusable batteries mean? Well, if each can do 100 equivalent full cycles every year, that means they can store and deliver back a half a terawatt hour every year. Okay, so just think about it. 100 equivalent full cycles is nothing for the kind of batteries I was showing you. 26,000 cycles, if these things are at 70% of their life, there's no problem to do 100 equivalent full cycles in a year. Okay. And if you are getting 5 gigawatt hours that are putting into reuse, that's a half a terawatt hour every year they can store. And the total US electricity demand is 45 terawatt hours per year today. So this half a terawatt hour is not insignificant. And if there's another 5 gigawatt hours or more coming every single year, this number starts racking up. And it becomes very interesting. It becomes very, very interesting. I'm going to stop here and just sort of summarize what I've said. Don't hesitate. Oh, this should say to buy. Don't hesitate to buy a used EV which has been driven in Canada from the battery perspective. Our temperatures in Canada are very moderate, and the batteries are going to show a very long lifetime. And the battery in your EV will have a significant value when the rest of the car is toast. Here in Nova Scotia, our roads are salted so heavily. Almost every vehicle bites the dust, and not because of engine or battery failure, because of rust. The frame is just gone. And it will have value either for recycling or second use. And don't hesitate to sign up for any vehicle to grid pilots in your area. You can control the state of charge range being cycled and schedule the state of charge range for vehicle to grid, as well as the minimum and optimum state of charge for the time that you need your car. So all these apps are going to be set up for your convenience to encourage you to use vehicle to grid. And it can make you money. And I don't think it will wear out the battery. There's just no evidence that that will be the case. And vehicle to the grid can make you a lot of money, especially in areas where there's a lot of renewables on the grid and where there are time of day rates. So I've been communicating with a lady in South Australia. Her name's Patricia Rooney. No, excuse me, Portia Rooney. And she's setting up virtual power plants there using EVs. And as an example, there's 70% of the energy from in South Australia comes from renewable solar and wind. And so there's times when it's sunny and windy, there's more electricity than can be used, and you get paid to take that energy. And then there's other times when there's no sun and very little wind, and then electricity prices are gigantic, are huge, so doing vehicle to grid in such jurisdictions like this, you can make a lot of money. And that's why she's setting up this type of thing in South Australia. Okay, so anyway, I hope this has been useful, and I'm happy to try to answer questions that you might have about the topic of this talk and about anything related to lithium-ion and sodium-ion batteries.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you. Before I call on Jason to take us through some of the attendee questions, I did have one question I wanted to ask about single crystal, and is single crystal particularly challenging either to manufacture, or is it costly to manufacture? What's the story there?
Um, Make single crystal NMC is very simple. You have to use a different size of precursor because you want the single crystal materials to be about 3 microns or 4 microns in size, whereas normal NMC would be a little bit bigger. And to get all the particles to merge together and form these solid single crystals of 3 microns, you have to heat about 50 degrees hotter than you would heat in the production of normal NMC. So what I've been told is it adds about a 2 to 3% cost premium over normal NMC. And the lifetime advantages are so significant that
Yeah.
there's a lot of motion towards single crystal.
And forgive me if you did cover this, and I may have missed it, my feeble brain. Um, does LFP also come in a single crystal format? I mean, is that something for LFP? Because clearly, I mean, what surprised me in one of your graphs there was that NMC was actually superior to LFP, and that's not the common lore. At least that's not what I understood to be the case. I thought iron phosphate had a more robust lifespan than NMC. But if it's single crystal, then NMC wins that race, right?
Yeah. Um, LFP really starts to suffer at high temperature as well.
Hmm.
So when you go to 40 degrees C with LFP, it's pretty poor compared to NMC at 40 degrees C. LFP has a problem in that you have to make the particles really tiny because the rate of lithium diffusion within LFP is incredibly slow.
Okay.
So you have to make the particles, the primary particles, really tiny to be able to get the lithium into the center and out in a reasonable time. For example, a 1 hour charge and discharge. So to try to make a bigger single crystal out of LFP would mean, you'd be looking at 100 hours to charge a car and maximum speed of about 5 kilometers an hour.
Yeah, I don't think we want to go there. I don't think we want to go there at all.
No.
You referenced Dr. Toby Bond, who did an episode with us a while ago, and I will put that link in the comment section or in the notes section of the recording of this video, so people can get to it. Toby's in Saskatchewan, and using a synchrotron, which was pretty cool piece of kit that you described as being rather costly. So there aren't a lot of them around. So anyway, he does a fabulous presentation, and as I say, we'll put that link in below. So Jason Arnaud, if you could join us on screen here and take us through some of the questions, Jason, if you would. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Jeff. Okay, our most popular question by far is, how many years do you think it'll take for this technology to be common in Canada?
I have no way, I have no way of knowing, but there are some activities in Canada. When I was here last year, I touched on these topics again, and there's a company in Montreal called DCBEL, which is working on vehicle to grid in the Montreal area. I don't know how they've progressed in the last year. There's a pilot here in Nova Scotia that if you have a car that it is enabled bi-directionally, that you can get involved with. So it's happening, and I think it will become a situation where certain jurisdictions are going to start to say, if you want to put an EV in my state, it better be vehicle to grid enabled so that we can deploy it in such a way in order to meet our energy demands and bring more renewables on the grid. You know, Canada has this giant lobby for oil and gas, right? And a lot of investment continues to flow into that space where it should be, okay, this is, we don't want to burn fossil fuels anymore. We've got to do everything we possibly can to eliminate them as fast as possible. So maybe governments eventually will really trigger on this and start to say, okay, everything has to be vehicle to grid enabled and so on. I mean, governments have done a pretty good job in, saying beyond such and such a year, you can't buy an internal combustion engine vehicle anymore. And whether that mandate holds true, we'll see. But many of the automakers have really come on strong with EVs, and General Motors now is the biggest EV seller in Canada. It's passed Tesla recently. So things are going the right way, and I think it's just a matter of time. So I'm happy that from the battery side, which is what I do, we're ready for vehicle to grid.
Yeah, and I would expect that utilities, I know there's work involved to prepare the infrastructure and get the grid ready for this. It isn't free, it needs work. But I would think that getting rid of things like the gas generating peaker plants that we have. It's a very expensive piece of equipment, facility. It costs a lot to run it. It only runs for a few hours a day, typically, I believe, during peak periods, and it pollutes. And if we can have these, millions of cars parked and plugged in, which is kind of where they are 90% of the time, uh, we could get rid of those things. They may become stranded assets. I don't know, but yeah,
Yeah,
it
you know,
should be exciting for the grid for the utilities, I think.
yeah, on this topic, it's an asset that the utility doesn't need to buy. They don't need to buy, 100 megawatt hours worth of energy storage if there's people willing to plug their cars in and able to do so. It's great
And
that way.
they can afford to pay us a little bit for supplying them with energy during peak times.
Yeah.
Sorry, Jason.
Great. Oh, no problem. Thank you. This next question is an interesting interpretation. They say, what do you think about the efficiency of using V2H with an orchestration system that could grab power from my EV to power my air conditioning during summer peaks? Would that be even simpler than V2G?
Well, there's a lot of vehicle to home and vehicle to load already existing in vehicles. So the F-150 Lightning does vehicle to home. Um, Tesla Cybertruck does vehicle to home. So there's examples where people I know of some examples in Texas where people have cyber trucks and they live, off grid. They go into work, they charge at work, they drive their big cyber truck home, and they power their home, which is off grid from the truck. And the next day they go into work and charge again and go back and power the home. So um, just an air conditioner, that's probably absolutely a fine thing to do. Now, I don't know about efficiency of all of that, but I think it's with the right vehicle, it's fully doable.
Yeah, it would be an interesting market to tap because most of the V2H stuff is aimed at if you lose power. But this suggestion is, what if you just say, I don't want to pay extra, so I'm going to supplement with my vehicle rather than paying the power company at peak times.
I think it's doable. You just have to get a dedicated wire from the AC unit to the vehicle.
Yeah. The next one is about V2G in general, and you've touched on it throughout your talk, but in a nutshell, for someone that has no idea what V2G is, could you just summarize in a few sentences and how it makes money for the home or vehicle owner?
Yeah. So the idea of vehicle to grid is you're using your vehicle to store electricity from the grid and deliver it back later. So the time that you would want to store it is when renewables are abundant on the grid or when electricity prices are high. So there's excess electricity and you want to put it into your battery. So during the daytime when the sun is shining and there's a lot of solar, you would charge batteries that are in vehicles doing vehicle to grid. And then at night, when there's no sun, you would deliver energy back to power homes and towns and whatever. And because you are donating your battery to doing this, you should be paid, right? And typically the amount that you will be paid is roughly the amount of that electricity costs. So here in Nova Scotia, you would be paid on the order of 23 cents a kilowatt hour for vehicle to grid, and maybe more. The example that I talked about in South Australia, you would be paid to charge your battery. They would pay you to charge your battery when there's excess solar and wind. And then when there's very little, you'd be paid a lot to deliver it back. So, net there, I don't know, it might be $1 a kilowatt hour, not 20 some cents.
Yeah. And where I live, there is an opportunity, and that's in Ontario. There is a program that's ultra low off-peak rate. And it's kind of the reverse, where in the daytime, we don't have enough solar yet. We're all running air conditioning and factories are running at full tilt. That's the peak time. But at nighttime, they can't turn down the reactors. They're still producing at a base load rate that's more than we need. And that's why electricity is so cheap. And it's occurred to me, and I haven't done the math on it, but if batteries come down sufficiently in price and cost, that you might be able to make money even if you didn't have an EV, put in one of these battery storage systems and use so-called arbitrage, right?
Yeah.
Fill it up when the electricity is ultra low price, and then sell it back or serve it back during peak times in the daytime. And maybe
Yeah.
that would pay for your battery. I don't know.
And that's fully suitable to vehicle to grid because your car is plugged in at night or can easily be, and you charge during the slow. In fact, that's what I do. I have time of day rates here, and we schedule our charging between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. So I get 50% discount in electricity to charge the vehicle at that time. So we always charge at night.
Yeah. And I'll just throw this in too, because I only discovered it about an hour before the webinar, but there is in fact a charger that's, as we call it, bi-directional. goes
Yeah.
back and forth, that is now certified and available. That actually works on most Tesla vehicles as well as other cars as well. So that's out on the market, and I expect we're going to see more of that as we go forward.
Okay, the next one, more V2G questions. So Barry asks, what car models in Canada can do V2G? And I don't know if you have a list of that handy that we can
No,
share.
I don't have a list of that handy. I should, but I don't.
Okay, Barry, I did find something quickly from last September. I will reply with the link in the Q&A. He's also asking, are we expected to buy cars like the Renault 5 someday, or do you think that's never going to happen?
No, you're not expected to buy cars like the Renault 5. What'll happen is all EVs will be vehicle to grid enabled. It's just a matter of time.
Okay. Next question, an interesting departure. Are you doing any work on sodium batteries?
Yeah, we have a big program in sodium-ion batteries at the university and in collaboration with our industrial partner. It's a really interesting technology, mainly because it doesn't use lithium and sodium is so abundant. It's very hard to make a sodium-ion battery that has the same energy density as even LFP. So sodium ion, if you're going to put in a vehicle, it's always going to be a sort of low to moderate driving range vehicle. But one of the things about sodium ion that's really compelling is its ability to operate well at high temperature and long, better than most lithium ion. So for energy storage systems in hot climates like Africa, India, sodium ion, I think, can really play a big role, because in a lot of those jurisdictions, the energy supply is just developing and it's all going in as solar and renewables, and you need to put in storage as well, and it's hot, right? So whatever technology you put in has to last a long time. So for example, LFP in jurisdictions like that, if it's just air cooled, and I don't know how you really cool when the air is at 45 degrees. You can only cool to 45 degrees. LFP only lasts like 3 years. So it's just not the ticket.
And
It's,
sodium's good at cold temperatures too, is it not?
it is. It's a good wide temperature range battery. Now the batteries will be physically about twice the size of LFP to store the same amount of energy, but if it's not moving, who cares? And if it lasts way longer, that's really good.
Mhm.
So actually, I plotted a graph this morning showing that a sodium ion battery, particular chemistry, operating at 85 degrees C. Okay, it's super hot. Nowhere on the planet is 85 degrees C, showing the exact same capacity retention as the best LFP battery operating at 40 degrees C. Incredible.
It's not
Incredible.
85 anywhere yet.
No, but incredible. The point is, the sodium ion is, I think it's going to play a role in, energy storage systems in hot climates. Yeah.
And the $1 million question, any guess when large scale production would begin?
Well, sodium ion,
Yeah,
what's happening now? It's
it
happening in
is.
China. Oh, yeah, happening in China. Actually, there's a company in the US called Peak Energy, and they're deploying sodium ion energy storage systems now. I think they just had an announcement a few days ago about the very first one that they've started operating. They're getting their sodium ion cells so at the moment from China, but their plan is to eventually manufacture in the US the exact or similar technology as what's being made in China. So it's happening, and sodium ion energy storage systems are already being deployed in China too. There's quite a few companies that are in, pretty serious mass production.
Jeff, just out of curiosity, what do you think that does to the recyclability of those batteries when they're sodium, as opposed, like right now, there's some valuable stuff that we get back that we can totally reuse. What's the case with sodium batteries? Because it's so cheap to begin with.
You know, recycling of the batteries that don't have nickel, manganese, cobalt in them is always a question. So LFP falls into this category as well.
Right.
So sodium ion and LFP, you say, my goodness, we can't have mountains of these things accumulating. We have to recycle them just because you can't have a giant pile of them. It's just not going to be possible. So what do you do? And I think the answer is you pay the equivalent of a tire recycling fee. So when you buy a tire, you pay money so that when the tire is finished, you throw it in a bin and it goes to a tire recycler, but they get that money up front so that they have an economic way to deal with all the scrap tires. And that's going to have something like that's going to have to happen when you buy an LFP or a sodium ion, or maybe the manufacturer has to pay this fee because they're selling these things so cheap, so that it becomes economical to recycle them, not for the material content, but just to eliminate this giant waste pile.
Basically, the consumer will underwrite the cost of recycling them to a
Or
degree,
the manufacturer.
or which in turn will come back to the consumer. But fair enough, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so I think it has something like that has to, it's like we pay a deposit on a pop bottle, you know,
Mm,
pop can deposit, pop bottle deposit, same thing to
yeah.
encourage recycling.
All right,
Okay, we have
Jason.
a few
Yeah,
more minutes.
yeah. We can
Uh,
do. I think we can do maybe two more if you've got them.
okay, just quickly, the Tesla virtual power plant example, do you happen to recall how many people took part? And,
Yeah,
you
well,
mentioned the $10 million in revenue, but how many people was that?
yeah. So I think it's quite reasonable to imagine on the order of $1,000 per power wall per year is what you could get. So if you take 10 million and divide by 10,000, you by 1,000, sorry, you get 100,000.
Okay,
That's a lot. That's a lot of people involved there.
yeah, and a reasonable
Did I do the
payback
math
per
right?
person.
No, it's 10,000. 10,000 times 1,000 is 10 million. So 10,000 people.
Okay. And we have a bunch of questions about maintaining battery health. So I will remind people to look at Jeff's previous presentation on our YouTube channel where he does a deep dive into that. But in short, Jeff, if I can paraphrase your earlier comments, charging up to 80, 85, and then keeping the variance, keeping the discharge as small as possible
Yeah,
is key.
charging frequently is good. And I would say numbers more like 70 to 75 as opposed to 80 to 85. So probably better, especially if you've got a long range car with a high nickel NMC. Charging to 70, 75 is better than 80 to 85. But then again, if you need a long trip, don't worry, go to 100%. But, just routinely 70 to 75 is what I would say.
And
So
I'll put a
treat
link.
it.
I'm going to put a link to the last three presentations that Jeff did in the comment section of the or in the notes section of the recording, so people can find it quickly. That battery health one, which I think is 2 years ago, Jeff, you did that one. Incredibly popular, like 74,000 views in 2 years. Um, a lot of people glammed onto that one. So, and it's chock full of really helpful information. So we'll get that back up for people to find quickly.
So I'd say in summary, for best battery health, treat your EV like your cell phone, not like a gas car. Don't run it to empty. Charge it as often as you can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
Jason, I think we've hit the wall here on time, so we'll cut it off there, and I'm going to thank Jeff. It's if you decide you don't want to come and do this next year, we're going to be heartbroken. Hopefully you will come back, and I guarantee I'll pursue you on that. But we definitely appreciate you doing this and sharing your knowledge and your experience with a pretty dedicated and enthusiastic group of EV folks. Thank you very much.
Very welcome. Maybe we'll talk about sodium ion next time.
Oh, that would be great. That would be absolutely amazing. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Good
Cheers.
night.
Cheers. In next month's webinar, we continue discussing batteries, but from a different perspective. Eventually, all batteries reach the end of their practical life and are ready to be recycled. John McQuaid, a VP at a company called Call to Recycle, joins the webinar to tell us about Canada's new EV battery recovery program and how his company facilitates the recycling process. You can help us spread the word about EVs and their many benefits simply by hitting the like button and by sharing your thoughts in the comments. It's quick, it's free, it helps more people discover us on YouTube. If you haven't already, please subscribe. That's a big help as well. That's all for this month's Canada Talks Electric Cars. Thank you for tuning in. From everyone at Electric Vehicle Society, stay charged, stay curious, and we'll see you next time.